What's up, YouTube? Welcome to my respiratory system physiology notes or slideshow. This is my slideshow, not my notes, sorry. Comment, like, subscribe. Respiration, 3 separate functions: ventilation, breathing, moving air. 3 separate functions of respiration are ventilation, gas exchange, and oxygen utilization. Ventilation, breathing, moving air. Gas exchange occurs between air and blood in the lungs, occurs between blood and tissues. Oxygen utilization, cellular response. Ventilation, conducting zones. All the structures air passes through before reaching the respiratory zone. Warms and humidifies inspired air, filters and cleanses. We got the larynx, the thyroid cartilage, cricoid cartilage, trachea, the carina, left primary bronchus, right primary bronchus. Physical aspects of ventilation. Ventilation occurs as a result in pressure differences induced by change in lung volume. Physical properties that affect lung function: compliance, elasticity, and surface tension. Gas exchange respiratory zones. Region of gas exchange between air and blood include respiratory bronchioles, must contain alveoli. These are the places where there's gas exchange: terminal bronchioles, respiratory bronchioles, alveolar sacs, alveolus, and respiratory system, respiratory zone. That's what that is. Alveoli. We have around 8 million air sacs. Surface area equals 60 minus 80 m squared. Each is 1 cell layer thick. Simple squamous epithelium, I would assume. Support cells, alveolar type 1, and structural cells, alveolar type 2, secrete surfactant, lowers surface tension, ability to increase as alveolar radius decreases. Pulmonary surfactant, basal lamina surfactant, alveolus, microphage, type 2 alveolar cell, type 1 alveolar cell, capillary endothelium. Lung, alveoli and pulmonary capillaries, fluid with surfactant. Type 1 alveolar cell, type 2 alveolar cell, microphage, alveolus, white blood cell, red blood cell, and capillary. Previously, we discussed the arrangement of respiratory structures, ventilation versus respiration. We discussed the linings of the lungs and cavity and why breathing works. Now, how does oxygen get into the blood and how does CO2 get out? Blood flow, pulmonary venule, pulmonary arteriole, capillary network of alveolus, pulmonary venule, pulmonary arteriole, alveolar duct, alveolar sac, alveoli, respiratory bronchial, terminal bronchial, bronchiole. Dalton's law, total pressure of gas mixture is equal to sum of the pressures that each gas is the mixture would exert independently. Partial pressures of gas in inspired air and alveolar air. Inspired air, variable. H2O, variable, 47 mmHg. CO2, 0.3 mmHg, 40 mmHg in the alveolar air. Oxygen, 159 mmHg, 105 mmHg in the alveolar air. N2, 601 mmHg, 568 mmHg in the alveolar air. Total pressure, 760 mmHg, 760 mmHg in the alveolar air. Significance of blood PO2 and PCO2 measurements. PO2 pressure in arterial blood is about 100 mmHg. PO2 pressure in the systemic veins is about 40 mmHg. PCO2 pressure in the 46 mmHg is the systemic veins. Partial pressure of gases in the blood. From pulmonary artery, capillaries to pulmonary vein to left atrium and the ventricle to systemic arterioles to body cells to systemic veins to right atrium and ventricle and back to and from the pulmonary artery. In the blood, we find 280 million hemoglobins, red blood cells. Each hemoglobin equals 4 polypeptide chains, 4 hemis. Each heme equals 1 atom of iron that can combine with 1 molecule of oxygen. Hemoglobin, beta chain, alpha chain, heme groups, alpha chain, beta chain hemoglobin. Oxyhemoglobin, heme that is bonded with oxygen. Deoxyhemoglobin, heme that is released its oxygen. Oxygen loading, unloading depends upon PO2 of environment. Affinity between hemoglobin and oxygen, affinity down when pH changes, affinity down when temperature changes. Muscle myoglobin, slow twitch skeletal fibers in cardiac muscle cells are rich in myoglobin, has a higher affinity for oxygen than hemoglobin, acts as a go-between in the transfer of oxygen from blood to the mitochondria, may also have an oxygen storage function in the cardiac muscles. Carbon transported in the blood, HCO3, 70%. This is accomplished by chloride shift, dissolved CO2 in the plasma, 10%. Carbaminohemoglobin, 20%. Carbaminohemoglobin, 20%. It's a tough word to say. Cell tissues. CO2 dissolved in plasma 10%. CO2 combined with hemoglobin to form carbanohemoglobin 20%. Red blood cells. CO2 plus H2O plus is H2CO3. H2CO3 is H plus HCO3. H combines with hemoglobin HCO3 70%. Chloride shift CI negative. Chloride shift at systemic capillaries. H2O plus CO2, H2CO3 plus H plus HCO3. At the tissues, CO2 diffuses into red blood cells. Reaction shifts to the right, increases HCO3 in red blood cells, so HCO3 diffuses in the plasma. Red blood cells loses negative charge and become more positive. CI diffuses in CI shift. Reversal chloride shift. Alveoli. Let's see. Red blood cells. CO3CI. HCO3 plus H. All right, that's it. I'm not gonna read too much into it. It's kind of hard to read. Check it out. At pulmonary capillaries, H2O plus CO2, H2CO3, H plus HCO3. At the alveolar, carbon diffuses into the alveolar. Reaction shifts to the left, decreases HCO3 in plasma, so HCO3 diffuses back into the red blood cells. Red blood cells become more negative. Diffuses out. Cl shift. Respiratory acid-base balance. Ventilation normally adjusts to keep pace with the metabolic rate. H2CO3 produced is converted to carbon and excreted by the lungs. H2O plus CO2, H2CO3, H plus HCO3. Respiratory acidos, hyperventilation, accumulation of carbon in the tissues. pH decreases. Plasma HCO3 increases. PCO2 increases. Respiration, alkalosis, hyperventilation, excessive loss of carbon. pH increases. Plasma HCO3 decreases. PCO2 decreases. Ventilation during exercise. During exercise, breathing becomes deeper and more rapid. Neurogenic mechanism. Sensory nerve activity from exercising muscles stimulate the respiratory muscles. Cerebral cortex input may stimulate brain stem centers. Humoral mechanisms. PCO2 and pH may be different by chemoreceptors. Cyclic variations that cannot be detected. Effect of exercise on arterial blood gases and pH. I would assume that's what that chart is over there. Lactate threshold, maximum rate of oxygen consumption that can be obtained before blood lactic acid levels rise as a result of anaerobic respiration. Trained athletes have higher lactate threshold because of higher cardiac output.